This is not another ecom podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. Today, we're diving into a success story that began in the crowded aisles of sneaker conventions and then catapulted straight into the heart of Amazon's marketplace. By age 13, our guest was selling sneakers, and then fast forward 5 years, he was already moving millions of dollars in product on Amazon, mastering retail, arbitrage, wholesale, and the seasonal market. And this was all before his 18th birthday. From the demand of summer pools to the festival lure of Christmas chocolates, he's cracked the code on what it takes to succeed in today's business. Today, operating lean and smart with just a virtual assistant and a streamlined prep center system, he's here to share his insights, mistakes, and victories in the Amazon space. So I'd like to welcome on today's episode, Dylan Sawyer. Dylan, thanks so much for being here.
Ian, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, man. So jumping straight into it, take us back to the beginning. Let's start with the sneakers. What ignited your passion for sneakers? And then how did you kind of parlay in that into $1 million business at such a young age?
Yeah, so originally I just had kind of always liked sneakers like Jordans, Yeezys, stuff like that. I always wanted to have the nicest shoes, just have nice clothes. And that kind of sparked my interest in the market of sneakers. And I would see that, oh, every Yeezy that's coming out is selling for pretty much double the price. So I thought if I can get a few pairs, I can keep the profit, get my own pair, and have a little bit more for the next time a Yeezy comes out. So that's exactly what I did. So the first drop I was successful on was the Yeezy 350 Blue Tints. That was in 2017. I got about 5 pairs, made like 150 a pair, and I was able to keep the shoe that I wanted and make profit as well. So I was like, this is a win-win. This is awesome. So I kind of kept doing that just to get stuff that I wanted for myself personally. And that led into like 2018, where I was buying Supreme, going to the bathroom during school and getting the drop on my phone. So I did that for a while. I wasn't really taking it too seriously back then in 2017, 2018. 2019 is when I started taking it a little bit more seriously. And that's when I started to do more retail arbitrage. But this was before Amazon. So I was going to like Foot Locker, Champs, stores in the mall, and just finding sneakers like Air Maxes, Air Forces, stuff like that that's on discount, and selling it on an app called StockX and Goat. And that's what kind of got my initial capital rolling. And I did that for about a year. And then it started to get very serious in 2020 when I got credit cards, stuff like that. And I really started to take it seriously. I saw the opportunity of buying online through botting and other ways of getting bulk amounts of inventory. And in 2020 was the year I did my first million in sales. And in that December, I had done like 300, 400,000. So it was a lot of success early, even before Amazon. So that leads us into 2021, early 2021, when I got into Amazon. It was with a few other sneaker friends, and we all split a Nike Ungate package, which was $7,500. We split it like 5 ways, 1,500 each. It was crazy. That information was not like freely accessible at that time. But even though we paid a lot for it, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. It brought me into Amazon. And I remember very clearly to this day, one of my friends showed me volume on one of these Nike shoes, and the estimated sales was like 7,000 a month. I was like, wow, doing real hyped up shoes and release shoes is the wrong industry. I need to be going where the volume is, which is where Amazon is. So early 2021, I started by doing a lot of retail arbitrage. I would go to like the Nike stores, and I would also just take a lot of the knowledge I knew from selling on StockX and Goat. Like a lot of those Air Maxes and Air Forces were also performing well on Amazon. So I was able to do like 100K my first month on Amazon. And by month 3, I had done, I think it was in May, and I had done like 300K in May. So it's pretty wild. I got it rolling really, really fast. And that leads us into like June, July, when I started getting into the pools. That was a really fun time. I got a Sprinter van, and I did a ton of retail arbitrage, just doing order pickups at Walmart, just all around the state, just going to pick up pools every day. And this is at a time where COVID was happening. So that was a really big impact on me in a positive way. Well, most people, it's a negative. And that kind of allowed me to spend more time on the business. The school I was going to at the time was just not prepared for COVID. So we had like 2 classes a week online. So I was just kind of able to do what I wanted every day. And I would just focus on scaling and learning more about business and Amazon. And that leads us back to the pools, where I made some connections from the sneaker world with like people who run bots and stuff like that. So I talked to one of the guys who used to get me a lot of sneakers, and I was like, if you run me a bot for Walmart on this pool, like, let's see how many we can get. And he starts running me, and we got like 300 in a day of these massive pools. And it was all going to come to my house. And it was just absolutely insane. We just had pallets on pallets of pools outside, just with tarps over them, just shipping them out one by one, merchant fulfilled. We couldn't even like store all of them. We had to refuse delivery on like 100 because we just had nowhere to put them. And that was a very wild time. Pools were a lot of work, but they're really fun to do, and is definitely worth the benefit. I learned a lot from selling them. And that leads us in kind of after the pools. I got back into sneakers, and I started to do it more through online arbitrage, because in Q4, it's just a lot easier to find those deals online rather than go into the Nike outlet every time I want to get shoes. Even though you can scale the Nike outlet to a pretty high volume. I mean, I was getting probably 1,000 pairs a week from there, just going to 2 stores like 4 times a week with like 4 or 5 people at a time. You can get a lot of volume, but it's just so much work. It's much better to be doing it online. And I was getting a lot of inventory ready for December. And on Black Friday 2021, this is still my biggest sales day. And it's because I sold through like an absolutely insane amount of shoes in just one day. So I listed 700 pairs of a really fast moving shoe, and they all sold in a day. And I ended up doing like 82,000, I think, on Black Friday 2021, which is absolutely insane. And that kind of taught me a lesson, though, to not sell everything too fast. I could have made more profit if I just held on to it and kind of let it coast through December. And I would have made more if I was selling it around like December 10th to 15th, just because like all the other sellers were out of stock at that point. And it was a crazy time. That was like my first understanding of like the real volume of Amazon, especially during Q4. Like it's a different level. There's nothing else like it. Like some of these products just move so fast. It's insane. And in 2022, in January, I realized I cannot do this from the house anymore. I need to get into a warehouse. And I was filling up my whole house, and my parents were like, all right, it's time to get out of here. I had storage units, but it was too much work going back and forth and just having the whole house filled at all times pretty much. So I got into a warehouse in January 2022. It's about 4,000 square feet. I was still doing a lot of OA at that time. I started to do a little bit more retail arbitrage again too with the Nike outlets, just because it was kind of easy. I had trained my employees on how to scan and go in the store and just find profitable stuff. So I'd have them go, and I would stay back and look for stuff in my computer. And that year, I started to diversify a little bit. I started to get more clothing. Later on that year is when I tried out seasonal products for the first time. So like decorations, chocolates, anything like Christmas that you can think of. And I ended up doing great with that. That's kind of where I found my niche. I really enjoy doing like not really risky, but like more fun products that are not just selling all year round, something that's seasonal that not a lot of people are looking for. And that was the first time I kind of diversified away from sneakers other than with the pools. And that led me into 2022 of that year. I did more in sales in 2022 December than 2021 by a good amount. But that Black Friday 2021 still by far my best day, which is kind of crazy, but I'll probably beat that sometime soon. But in 2022, I realized that doing sneakers at a high level, I need to be dealing with the returns in a more efficient way. And I just was not doing that. In the warehouse, I would just have always new stuff. And all the Amazon boxes that would come back would kind of just get put to the side. And I ended up having like 1,100 pairs that got sent back from Amazon. And it was just a huge headache to go through that and check everyone, sell some to liquidators. A lot of them didn't have the original box. It was like in a Amazon replacement box. It was a massive headache to get rid of all that. And I realized like I can't do sneakers unless I'm fully dealing with all these returns. So I stopped buying shoes in December 2022. And in 2023, is when I started wholesale. So I poked around at a couple trade shows. First one was the Atlanta Market. Is that America's Mart? It's not very popular for Amazon guys, but it's more popular for like gift shops, smaller businesses like retail stores. And then after that, I went to ASD in March, which was a blast. I had a great time there, found a couple good suppliers, and met with a ton of really cool people. And those were the two main trade shows I did at the beginning of the year. I ended up going to ASD again in August. And I went to Expo East pretty recently, like a month or two ago. And all of those went well. The ASD in August, I did much better. I kind of knew what I was doing. I had better navigational awareness of what to do at ASD. Before, I was just going booth to booth, pretty much talking with everyone. The second time, I went to maybe 6 vendors and I spent like 80,000. So did much better and more efficiently. So that was really good. And Expo East was a very different type of show. That was more focused on like brands and building brand direct connections, while ASD is more distributors. And that kind of leads us to today, where I'm doing maybe 30-40% wholesale, 60-70% arbitrage, all online arbitrage. I haven't really done Nike outlets in like a year and a half now, but I'm still buying a lot of seasonal, getting ready for Q4 and just loading up on inventory.
Wow. Wow. That is quite the story. And it's, there's a lot of, I think that there's a lot of key moments in there that you can really put your finger on that are the transition into, each different stage of that journey. The interesting part about, transitioning and pivoting is that you start to run into new problems, but even though they're new problems, they are familiar problems. So is there anything that you can, let's say from working with shoes, moving into the Amazon game, that you're like, this is a problem I had and how I was able to kind of learn from it so I didn't make similar mistakes in the future?
Yeah, so I would say like outsourcing some of the help purchasing was something that I did in the sneaker days that I also do now. So when I find a OA deal, let's say now, I'm not really doing the purchasing if it involves a lot of transactions. Like if I have to buy a gift card and then buy 10 quantity and I have to do that 50 times, I'm not doing that. And that's something I did with sneakers as well, with having botting outsourced. So the model for that was pretty much 50-50. So whoever was running the bot for me was getting 50% of the profit, and I was getting the other 50% for putting up the capital. And it made it a lot easier for me. I didn't have to spend a lot of money on software and proxy, all this complicated stuff. I just didn't have to deal with it. And I was still able to get a great amount of profitable inventory. So that's one thing. But another thing that I have with a problem I have with Amazon that I didn't really have with sneakers, I don't have this too much anymore, but cash flow with sneakers is very, very fast. Like if there was a shoe that I got 500 pairs of, I could sell it to a bulk buyer and have the money a week from then. With Amazon, it's just not possible at all. So I do FBA pretty much exclusively, and getting it to the Amazon warehouse from the retailer is going to take like 7 to 10 days. Getting it checked in is going to take another 5. Selling it might take a month, a couple weeks. Then getting paid out is another 2 weeks. So it's a lot longer time before you see that money. But once you kind of have the ball rolling and you're doing consistent volume, it doesn't really happen very much. But that's definitely probably the main issue I've had with Amazon that I didn't have with sneakers.
Yeah, yeah, I can appreciate that. Cash flow is an issue. It's an issue in all businesses, and especially with Amazon, where some of the times that generating that capital is a bit longer tail. It's important to, first of all, probably stay strong in the beginning. So until that ball gets rolling, knowing that if you're pulling the right levers, you're doing the right thing, that cash flow will continue to roll in and hopefully sustaining that business while the other cash is tied up. I wanted to kind of jump backwards a little bit. You were talking about like, call it outsourcing, but it almost sounded like with the bots, you were kind of working it was almost like a joint venture with somebody else. Can you tell me how you kind of navigate something like that, as a teenager, still kind of learning the ropes?
That's a good question. So I actually did that with multiple people, and it was a very common thing back then. A lot of the big sneaker guys, or a lot of people who I know who came from a sneaker background who transitioned into Amazon, used to also do the same thing. And even I did that. I would run bots for other people and split the money, but it's just so much work on the botting side. But picking a person to have run for you it is a little bit challenging to give someone your credit card info and really put that trust in
Most
them.
definitely.
And you kind of just have to go with people who have something to lose, who have like a decent social media following, who are selling to a lot of other sellers. You don't want to just give your cards and all your addresses to a random guy with 10 followers who isn't really involved very much in the community. You want to give it to someone who has a big name, who has something to lose, a reputation. If you give it to someone small, they could easily just run off with your money and nobody would really care. But if it's someone who's big in the community, people are going to be like, wow, like people are going to want to go after him or try and see what's going on with him if they run away like that. So it's pretty easy to vet someone out. I feel like I've never been scammed really or had anyone like take my cards or anything like that. So I've been pretty lucky in that regard. But at some points I had like 5 to 10 people running me at one time. Like it was 5 to 10 different people with all their different bots and stuff, because that market is just so difficult. It's kind of dead now, but back then there's 30, 40 different bot companies and only a handful of them are going to work on that specific release. So we'll use like Yeezy Supply as an example. They're going to be changing their bot protection and changing how the website works release by release. So it might be 2 months where one bot is absolutely crushing it, and then they just completely stop working the next release, and then one other one comes up. So you kind of have to have a multitude of people, like 5, 10, if you really want to be consistently successful. Because if not, you're just going to run into people who are using too much of the same stuff and just not really get any pairs. You need to have a lot of different people running different softwares to actually make money doing that.
But by having a lot of people running different softwares, that means you got to put your trust in a lot of different people, because this isn't like your corporate joint venture where you have contracts or anything. It's more like your receipts are the DMs and your leverage and its hope is their reputation. But that's the extent of it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I put my trust into a lot of people and it's paid off pretty much every time. And I kind of realized that paying sales tax and shipping to Georgia wasn't the best way to do it, because especially on Yeezys, it's a little bit different with Amazon because the cost of shoes are going to be much lower, like $30, $50, $70 retail shoes. With Yeezys, it's $220 a pair. I'd be paying like $15 in sales tax on every single shoe. So I realized I can just pay someone $2 or $3 and just have them handle it for me. Mm-hmm. So I did that as well. So that's putting my trust into other people. And of those 2 people who I do that with, I still sometimes send, or one of them runs a prep center now who I send pretty much all my volume to. And the other one who I sent to does Amazon, and I still talk to him on a consistent basis. So it's kind of cool how those connections have transitioned into other things, like my friend Danny having a full-time prep center, prepping tens of thousands of units a month, all from doing sneakers back in the day.
Yeah, that's just the power of networking, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So Dylan, I have maybe this is a tough question, but this might be something that you thought of. Can you go over like the biggest dud you've ever had, the biggest mistake that you made, and then kind of how you handled that?
Yeah, okay, this is a good one. So I would say it was these hoodies. They're called Essentials hoodies. Fear God Essentials is like the brand. And I bought an absolute ton of them. I'd sold a good amount of them before. They release like once every couple months, and they're always like pretty consistent profit. And one thing that was kind of emerging that wasn't like very common was like the fake market for a lot of these like hyped up clothing. And on that one, it was really bad. So the prices on those kind of just tanked, and I had thousands of them, and I had it locked in with the buyer beforehand. And this buyer was like a middleman. Like he wasn't like actually the one putting up the funds. He was just selling it to another buyer pretty much. And this guy took like a month to pay me like $250,000. It was really, really bad. And I ended up having to set up like I think it might have been a Stripe or something to take credit card payment, because this dude could not pay me. So I had to set up all of this stuff just so he could pay me on his credit card, which is kind of crazy. And I had to take like a 2-3% hit on that. And I ended up selling it all for pretty much break even or just under that. That was like the most stressful thing I've gone through with that, because it was like a month of him just like not responding. And I delivered all this to him in person, and it was supposed to be wired like the next day. And it was in Philadelphia, which is like 12 hours away from where I live. Drove the Sprinter up full of hoodies, and it just was taking so long for him to pay. I had credit cards coming up, and this was at a time where I was doing Amazon as well. And I was really thinking about it. I was like, I should have never bought those. I should have just doubled down on Amazon and forget all the hype stuff, forget clothes, shoes, all of that. And that's kind of what I did. I never really touched a hyped up item after that again. And I learned my lesson there to just not sell to these middleman buyers and just get out of that industry entirely.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, the hypes, like when you're talking hype stuff, you're talking, shoes, streetwear, that kind of stuff, the things that people get really, really excited about. But I also know that you're talking about other things that people get excited about during COVID, like the pools. I remember that like space heaters were a big thing for a minute. Like there's all these things. So when you're talking, like when I hear hype products, I'm thinking about the money makers that everyone's chatting about, not necessarily like streetwear. But I guess my question is, like, how does an individual, someone who might be listening to this podcast, stay on the pulse of these kinds of things? Understand that right now is the time to get into, I don't know, riding lawnmowers because everyone's buying riding lawnmowers. Like, where does one look?
That's a really good question. So I would say just the biggest thing is being active on Twitter, social media, Discord. I was getting most of this information from Discord groups. In the sneaker world, Discord groups, it was called cook groups, for anywhere from like $30 to $100 a month, where most people were getting their info from. There's hundreds of these groups, and all of them had a little bit of something different to offer. Like there was one in the guy, Danny, who does all my prep now. He had a group called Brick Chat. That was in 2019. It was kind of the first of its kind. And that showed people how to sell these like Air Forces, Air Maxes, those type of products that weren't like the traditional Yeezys and Jordans. And just taking like little nuggets from all these different groups really helped me out. Like there's one of my friends ran called Soul Specialist. That kind of introduced me into the items that you're talking about, like the pools, the weights. I did a little bit of that on eBay, but I'm just not a big fan of like eBay's infrastructure and like how you list products and stuff. I'd prefer Amazon over it all day. I just hadn't had my account open then yet. So I didn't really do pools in 2020, but I did them in 2021. I did a little bit of weights in 2020, like the Bowflex, like the big sets. Those were super easy to sell. And just communicating with other sellers is another big thing. Like I've pretty much talked to other sellers every day for the past 4 years or so, just chatting ideas, sharing leads. The more you talk with other people, the more successful you're going to be in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that, when something's hot, everyone's talking about it. And especially when someone's not in kind of your buying radius, like in the case of the pools, you have like the Walmarts that are around you. And if you're talking to dude in Oregon, like he's not a competitor for you because he can't drive to wherever you are, to where you are to pick up those pools. So it's in his best interest to give you that lead. So next time you find something hot, you throw it to him. Cool, man. Well, one of the things that I'm also usually really interested in when we're talking about, reselling markets, especially when we're talking, you had mentioned the headache of dealing with returns, is, secondary markets outside of Amazon. And so at this time where you've transitioned, to a wholesale arbitrage split mostly on Amazon, do you still operate in other kind of secondary markets in order to, move inventory that's, not selling on Amazon, or if it's damaged, or if it's returned in a package that isn't suitable to send out to customers? And which ones are they, and what are the benefits of those?
Yeah, so I tried eBay out for my sneaker returns, and it did just not go well. Like I was selling I had maybe 200 pairs listed. I was selling like one every couple of days, and I realized like this is not the place to be selling these shoes. So what I did was, of that 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever it was, about 500 or 600 I was able to clean up and make it good enough to sell back on Amazon, like replace the box or whatever, and just basically just get it right back into Amazon. Just took a ton of time because in these replacement boxes, it doesn't have a UPC. It doesn't say the sneaker name. It's just a brown box. I don't even know what's inside of it looking from the outside of the box. But Another place where I kind of started up recently, Walmart. I sold my first couple items on there a couple weeks ago, and I've been doing a couple units a day on there. So I'm kind of testing the waters there with some stuff that didn't sell well on Amazon. So that's a new venture I'm kind of excited to get into. I'm very happy with the volume so far. It's actually better than I expected. And for the rest of those sneakers, though, 300 I sold to a liquidator, ones that were like dirty, like stuff that I wouldn't even want to sell like online, even on eBay, like tears and just stuff that I just never wanted to see again. And it was for like 16 bucks a pair or something like that. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. It was like shoes that are like $100 retail. So he definitely made his money too. And then the other like 200 or 300, I got kind of lucky because my mom has a gift shop here in Savannah, Georgia, where I'm from. And this is like a big tourist city. So she gets a lot of foot traffic from just random people walking in. And her store has nothing to do with clothing or shoes or anything like that. But if I put in a good selling pair of Converse that anyone really can wear for like 30% off retail, people are going to buy it. So I moved those through there. I sell like a few pairs a day. That's a really good outlet. Also for like some beauty stuff, soaps. Like I've had a few things that don't sell that I just give straight to her, and it does very, very well in her store. And then Walmart's another good one. And one thing I've done kind of recently, stuff that wouldn't sell in her store or wouldn't sell online at all, is start a cold call. I would just look up the product name and find all the retail stores that are selling it and just call each one of those stores and be like, hey, I have 200 units of this. I can sell it to you at this liquidation price of $6. And because I know it's going to be better than whatever wholesale price they're getting it, because I'd be selling it at a loss. And they can just take it right off my hands. I did that a couple times recently, and that's really come in handy.
Yeah. So sounds like you got to get creative. You have some opportunities like your mom's gift shop. That is something that you leverage, but also you're getting creative and going outside, making those cold calls is a way that you can help move those products. So, because you're not sitting, because if you're sitting on it, then that's just cash that's not moving. Might as well get some cash back in your hand in order to move forward.
100%. And another thing I want to touch on, I use that gift shop as a play for wholesalers as well. I'll say we have retail, and I just consider that kind of my retail store because I do have some products in there. So it's a really good approach to get my foot in the door with a lot of wholesalers, because a lot, especially at a show like Expo East, where it's majority brands, they don't want to deal with people who only do online sales. They want to have their products in retail stores. And if I don't have a retail connection, they're going to be like, no, like it won't even get my foot in the door.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's so smart to be able to just leverage that opportunity. Cool, man. Well, I just have one more question. I actually have two more questions, but the last question on this vein is, you are part of this generation of, e-commerce sellers that are getting into the business, young and really have the entrepreneurial spirit. And so for like your fellow entrepreneurs that are kind of in this age bracket that are kind of getting after it right now, do you have any, expectations? Like, what do you envision for this kind of set of e-commerce sellers that are kind of entering this world and playing with the big boys?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially on the younger side, who make a lot of money online, especially like under 20 and making like 10K plus a month, I don't think they'll ever work a job again. I think that it changes your perception on money. And once you kind of do it once, I feel like you're always going to have that entrepreneurial spirit. Like there's some people I know from sneakers who kind of stopped after that. It didn't really transition to Amazon, but like 95% of these young guys who I'm talking to have found something else to do, whether that's maybe not even Amazon, maybe opening up a sneaker store. Like one just opened from someone who I'd known from a Discord group like 3-4 years ago, hadn't talked to him since then. And he moved to Savannah and opened up a store in our mall. And it's cool to see that guys are still crushing it. And I think this next generation is going to be a different level of entrepreneurs, because the opportunity online right now is bigger than it's ever been, especially with COVID. That gave a lot of kids, like people in high school, a huge opportunity to spend more time on their business, just like me. Because if I didn't have COVID, I would maybe still be in school right now, maybe go to college, or maybe have taken a different route. But COVID kind of changed everything. That opened me up to virtual school. I would have never done virtual school if COVID didn't happen. I would have never thought I would have been homeschooled. That was just never something that went through my brain. And it ended up happening after that because I was like, oh, this online stuff, this is easy. I'm doing this all day. I'm not leaving the house. And that, I think, changed a lot of people's minds about homeschool. A lot of these young entrepreneurs I know now are doing full virtual school instead of going in the classroom every single day. I think that's another positive effect from COVID as well. But yeah, I think there's a lot to come for this next generation of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I think it's super rad that, there are entrepreneurs, like you, and even guys that are just a little bit older that are kind of like pioneering this type of business to the more set in stone corporate style of doing business, because there's a point where, I'm seeing more and more people in your generation being taken seriously by, much larger and more established companies because of the work that you do and because of, the checks that you write. I mean, Dylan, you've probably never written a check in your life. Everything's probably been super digital, but I think that's something that's super impressive with this whole generation of people. So as we kind of finish out this episode, I wanted to provide an opportunity. Do you have any kind of like conclusions about anything we spoke about, or any kind of final thoughts or anything you'd like to share to our audience?
I'll just say, if you're getting into the Amazon space, go all in. Like, it's so worth it. Like, the rewards and benefits, the people I've met in this space are just so awesome. Like, I have friends that I've met just in the Amazon sneaker world I'll be friends with for life. People who I made huge business connections with. And I'm sure some of these people who I might not even think of 15, 20 years down the line are going to be doing such special things, and I'll still be talking to them. So if you're not all in and joining social media and talking to other sellers, definitely do that. Like, one cool story from a sneaker guy I know started a credit card company about 2 years ago. It's fully like ready to go now. I've been using it a lot. It's just something I never would have expected. Someone who's 19, 20 years old, starting their own credit card company that I'm using, spending 100,000 plus a month with. It's pretty wild to see like all the different angles that people take. But yeah, definitely go all in on Amazon, talk to as many people as you can. And yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Amazing. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that goes for anything that you're doing, whether it's business or an art form or a sport or whatever, having a little bit of faith in yourself in order to kind of accomplish a series of goals is something that, everyone can take away from this conversation. So I really, really appreciate you bringing that up. And Dylan, I really appreciate you coming on and, sharing your story with us and some of your insights, the things that have gone well, the things that haven't gone well. And it's been an absolute pleasure.
Ian, thank you so much for having me on, man. I had a great time.
All right. So there you have it, folks. Dylan Sawyer, young entrepreneur from shoes to Amazon and beyond. Thanks again. And this was Not Another Econ Podcast.
Thank you.